Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. I'm joined here by two wonderful people, James and Dahlia, who are registered dietitians and founders of Married to Health. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because we have a lot in common, but we're also looking forward to sharing a lot of important information to the audience and, some things that, they may not be aware of. And I want to talk about plant-based diets, specifically from a dietitian's perspective. Like, when you do your studies and you do your research, you get a lot of information from a lot of different areas, right? You get, information around meat and dairy and plant-based diets and, how to balance everything. So I'm really interested from your perspective, having gone through all that study, what made you want to choose a plant-based diet? And let's talk about some of the science around that.
Love it. Yeah. It was really, I would say our whys were deep rooted in our own health struggles, first and foremost. So I always let Dahlia go first with this because hers is way more interesting than me, so I'll let her go. But it was definitely rooted in our health struggles for sure.
I kind of, to be brief with my own health journey, I grew up as first generation American here, quickly kind of became acculturated and infatuated with all the hyper palatable, hyper processed American foods, and quickly found that plus a sedentary lifestyle really quickly leads you to become obese and inflamed and unhealthy. So there I was as an adolescent, as a teenager, getting ready to graduate high school, start my college career. And I was obese. And in one day I went to the doctor. I was having some unrelated issues with my ear. So I saw an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and he pointed out that I had a large goiter, or my thyroid looked inflamed. So he sent me to an endocrinologist who in one day diagnosed me with prediabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis. And I had high cholesterol, hyperlipidemia at that time as well. And all that time leading up to that, I had been seeing my primary doctor, who I had been seeing since I was a child, who would comment on my weight, right? I would go in because I was sick often. I'd go in to get my antibiotics and continue with my tonsillitis or my ear infections. And he would comment on my weight and tell me I needed to lose weight. But that was it. The conversation stopped there. As a child, I didn't know how to do that for myself, and I didn't necessarily have access to those resources to help me do so. So that was a wake-up call when I was diagnosed with all of those different things. And so I embarked on my college career. I was studying psychology and quickly realized, while it's interesting and so valuable and important, I just didn't think it was 100% for me. So I was still kind of figuring things out. And for my own personal gain, was taking nutrition classes to start helping myself, and found that is really where my passion was, and decided then to kind of pivot toward nutrition. And that's really where my story and James's stories intersect. And that's really when we met and started kind of exploring different ways of eating together.
Yeah. And then just for me really quickly, I'm like a third or fourth generation American here, but I'm a Hispanic background, some Native American as well. And so, grew up, in the 90s, right? Late 80s, 90s, and just, all the Go-Gurts and processed food, Pop-Tarts, and you name it, right? So Kool-Aid Jammer, like all the cool stuff that you thought was like colorful and fun and good, not even thinking about what's good for me, or what is actually food's purpose, and what is nutrition, right? So no consciousness about that in my family, really. Just absorbing it all. Quickly became obese myself. I was, an obese child, adolescent, and even kind of moving into junior high school, overweight. And so I grew up that way, developed arthritis, was always sick, not arthritis, sorry, but like joint pain. Was never like, formally diagnosed, but joint pain, asthma, obese, what else? Allergies, would get hives and different rashes that, so many things, pointing, now looking back to just inflammation, something's wrong. And poor gut health, so many markers for that, for sure. And then quickly realize, wow, you don't have to live life this way, right? Like there's a way to actually be healthy. So that started to happen around high school, started to exercise more, started to realize, hey, what I eat matters. And that kind of led me into college of really being, I was obsessed with exercise and fitness. So I went down more I wanted to be a physical therapist, was studying kinesiology, quickly realized, though, there's only so many movements and stretches that you can do. And if the nutrition isn't right, the structures aren't right? So then really fell in love with nutrition, switched my major, and that's where I met Dahlia. And we're both, like on our health journeys, like she said. And it took us about a year and a half to 2 years to like actually go 100% plant-based, but we were reading the research, going to different conferences, talks, reading books.
And really just learning about the food system. It all kind of started with that. It didn't even
Yeah.
start out with the intention of being plant-based. We were just learning food systems and, more about the agriculture, especially here in the United States. And in the college that we went to, we were in the College of Agriculture. So there were farm animals there on campus. They did have a farmer's market. So we got to really see it and learn about it. And I remember reading Michael Pollan's In Defense of Food and watching Food Inc. And at that time, really thinking something is off with not only the way that we are raising this food, right? At that time for us, it was food, but in the way that it was being done, and then in the way that it impacted the environment as well. So we started taking kind of a keen interest in what are the environmental implications of the way that we're eating as Americans. How does that then kind of factor into our health and really converge into our health? If it's really affecting our environment, then we're putting that into our mouths and other foods in the environment as well. So we really took an approach to eating plant-based for health, for the environment. And you kind of pick up more of these more vegan traits as you go along and you start learning them, right? Not all of us kind of set out as animal activists or as having those vegan values per se. But once you really unlock those doors, you start to take an interest in them. And it's something that you really struggle to turn a blind eye to once you're exposed to it.
Right. So yeah, and then fast forward to now, we're 100% plant-based for about 11 years, running our own private practice where, again, it's not like, okay, to be our patient, you have to be 100% plant-based and vegan. No, but it's a big part of our core value in a sense of just reading the research and understanding what's going on, being conscious and aware, having that balance. And especially when it comes to gut health and the gut microbiota, for sure. We want that diversity of plants.
Not just for us, but really for our daughter. We have an almost 7-year-old daughter now, and she's been 100% plant-based, vegan, if you will, her whole life. And she's really also been raised to have that appreciation for what food is, our relationship with food, our relationship with the environment, our relationship with other beings on this earth. And so she really surprises us. We are the ones raising her. She surprises other people with the way that she eats, but really surprises us with just the healthy relationship that she has with these healthy whole foods, and how we know that the things that we're doing are helping her better her own path. Because when we look back at ourselves at 7 years old, we were already displaying symptoms of disease and disorder. And we were down that path of, again, that standard American. So to see her, she's, been extremely healthy, has a very healthy, robust gut, a very healthy, robust immune system, affirms, along with the science that we read about plant-based nutrition, this lifestyle for us.
I love it when you talk about that kind of stuff, because there's so many theories out there, but when you put that into practice and you can see the application of the theory in practice, and it actually correlates with that, it's so empowering. Because obviously, I've got 2 kids, and one's 4.5, the other's 1.5. And my daughter at the dinner table yesterday, we just had some like lightly blanched kale, and she was just like munching on the kale, and me as a 4-year-old, I don't think I would have been interested in that at all, so it's very cool when you start to just let them know, okay, these are the foods that are going to help you and make you stronger and make you healthy, and that kind of stuff, that they really take that on board and kind of implement it for their own sake. They probably don't grasp the overall picture at this stage, especially not at 4.5, but it's just interesting to see how open they are to eating foods that we as kids probably would have just left to the side. Would have just left it on the side.
I almost feel like there was an active campaign in the 90s, like when you look at media, especially here in the United States. I mean, it was almost like like that was like a meme, almost what we would consider a meme now, right? Is like there's always in movies like, ill broccoli, like eat your vegetables. Like it was almost this like media campaign against vegetables. It was really odd, like looking back. It was like, what is that? And then come to find out, you know, as a child, we talk about the first 1,000 days a lot in terms of gut health for children. We talk about really children being like that wet clay, right? Like that's the time to mold them. And as time, what happens to clay? As time goes on, it gets harder and harder and harder. Not impossible. You can always add water to it and do some manipulation. So it's never too late. I don't want to put out there that it's too late. But as a child, you are that new block of clay, and you're just being molded by everything. Words, thoughts, actions, smells, you know, everything is molding you into who you're going to be and the habits you are forming. So it's like, it's so unfortunate sometimes when it's like kid food, kid menu. You don't like that, don't eat that, oh, that's not kid food. All this kind of negativity around healthy habits and healthy eating for kids is like gotta end. That's one thing we're really passionate about, is helping people with gut issues, but also helping prevent gut issues from ever happening.
That has to be number one, right? Like, why wait until something happens, right? Like, you know, we've all been there, right? Dali, you've had your issues. James, I've had my issues. Like, you know, I was on 4 different prescription medications at the age of 27. You know, I know Shamiz has the big story. My brother, it's like you and Dali, right? My brother has the big story about being in hospital and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, we all grew up eating that way. And you know, I feel jealous of my kids, you know, the start that they had in their life compared to, you know, what we had. But I think, yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at that. And then, yes, the beginning stages of life are super important, but it's never too late. You know, you see so many amazing transformations of people who are even in their older ages, you know, reversing amazing, you know, really serious conditions and changing their life and starting to do exercise and losing all sorts of huge amounts of weight and things like that. So let's delve into a bit of the science now, because I wanted to talk about that. So as dietitians, obviously researched a lot of different areas around, you know, all of the different types of diets, and you've been, I guess, at the school, from what I've heard anyway, is that you get taught, okay, you need to eat these foods for these nutrients and all that stuff. So kind of maybe let's just talk about, where does that come from? And I've, you know, my research is very clear to me that a plant-based diet is very optimal, the most optimal way to live. And, you know, it's the only diet that's proven to reverse heart disease, and the only diet that's proven to reverse type 2 diabetes. And, you know, and it's so effective against certain types of cancers. But this information doesn't really reach the public very easily. So maybe, you know, can we discuss that a little bit, and why you think that might be the case?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would start with, first and foremost, there's sections and puzzle pieces, if you will, missing, right? So that's what you have to come into if you're going into PubMed. And I don't know if it's the same for you. I mean, we have like PubMed, right, which is part of our NIH, right, National Institutes of Health, and it's a lot of our taxpayer dollars fund NIH research, which are grants that go, you know, the whole process, right? The grants, and they go to different universities or organizations doing the research. Then we publish it on a portal, which we call PubMed, and we look through all the research, right? And so what we have to come into that understanding is science is always evolving, science is always changing. And there's huge amounts of science, even in the area of nutrition. Like, so I would even say, and I think even Harvard, if I'm remembering correctly, did a reviewed analysis of nutrition being one of the most underreported and researched areas, right? So there's still so much to explore, even in nutrition. But then we dive deeper into the gut microbiota, right? And all the microbes, which in the last 15 to 20 years, much of the research we're really standing on has come out. And that's kind of crazy when you think about, you know, going back hundreds of years ago or 200 years ago, a lot of the research and medical, let's say medical sciences, we're still using research from like 100 years ago. In terms of the gut microbiota, we're using research from like 15 years ago. So it's not that long ago that we're like, wow, there's this whole other world inside of us. We coined the term, not we coined the term, but the term has been coined of superorganism, right? Where we are a living organism, and within us are multiple universes of living creatures. And it's like, whoa, to where we can call ourselves a superorganism. So where I was getting to with all this is understanding there's still so much research to be done. So when you kind of come into that and you have that humble, I think, perspective of going, whoa, like, wonderful research studies coming out in 2022 or even last year 2021, there's still so much to be done. Let's take that humble approach and try to connect the dots as best we can. And then and
not only that, we're seeing a lot of industry bias, especially here in the United States. We see the USDA, right? The studies that are used to create the guidelines and the Healthy People 2020, Healthy People 2024. These guidelines are heavily industry funded. That is why you'll see, the American My Plate recommendation and recommended way of eating is so different maybe from the Canadian standards. And we know that with their latest review, in the Canadian review, they didn't allow any industry funded research to influence their recommendations. So they don't recommend dairy only, right? They recommend either water, other beverages, or low fat dairy. So there's less of that bias slant there. I think here we don't do a great job of removing that industry funded. We saw it firsthand, whether that was in our books, our nutrition books, when we were learning in, undergrad, or even when I completed some of my graduate studies. It's like there is funding in our research and in our books. There's funding when we would go to conferences. Some of the main sponsors of some of these, it used to be called the American Dietetic Association. It's now the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and it's our representative body as dietitians. We would go to these conferences, and McDonald's was a gold sponsor, the beef industry, the dairy industry, and you're going to get biased information when you have that biased funding. And the justification for having those funders was always, well, it makes the conferences more affordable for you as dietitians. But we're not there to have a watered down education. We want to hear the true, unbiased, unfunded research. We don't want to hear somebody from the Beef Council telling us that beef should be on everyone's plate. So we're seeing that is really heavily slanting the recommendations at large and the recommendations trickling down from top to bottom. And so us as dietitians, I remember when I was practicing as a dietitian, I would have the Dairy Council sending me emails saying, hey, do you want us to send you free booklets to share with your patients? So it's really, really insidious, I would say, especially as us as nutrition professionals. And, James had mentioned PubMed. What we know is sometimes a lot of the really good research is not even accessible to the public, or if you're not associated with a university who's providing you with access to that, sometimes some of this really good research you're not even accessing, or you have to pay to access, although it's taxpayer funded. But we know with that, a lot of healthcare professionals might not necessarily be looking into conflicts of interest, or who is funding these studies, and might there be some conflict there. So we see that also influencing the way that our peers are practicing. And I don't think that it's intentional that they're saying, okay, we're going to recommend, beef on the plate, dairy on the plate. But when these companies and these organizations and these, lobbyists are coming in and saying, hey, let me help you, it tends to be a little bit easier to say, yeah, Dairy Council, send me your books, or sure, I'll go to this.
What about the fact that it's such a ingrained way of eating that a lot of people would like to kind of say, yeah, I mean, of course I eat this way, so I want to hear all the good things about the way I eat, and of course I'd like to recommend that as well. I think that plays a small role, maybe a larger role, I don't know, but that might actually be a part of it too, because I mean, at times we can be in our little plant-based bubble, and a lot of people that we know are plant-based, but compared to the kind of general population, that's a very small number.
Well, and I think something interesting in the last couple of years has been the emergence of a couple different schools of thought. And this might be controversial, what I'm going to say, but that balance of what intuitive eating looks like, or this whole school of thought of healthy at every size. I'm not saying that I'm against any of these thought processes or these schools of thought, but again, what does that intuitive eating look like? Again, how have you been conditioned to intuitively want to eat? Like you said, is the way that you were raised eating, has that changed your physiology and your anatomy to where maybe you're not healthy at every size? We have to keep that in mind as healthcare practitioners. I get being an advocate of being healthy at different body shapes and body sizes, but when that's actually healthy and that person is not risking their health,
I think
that's
a really important point, because yes, everyone should be comfortable with the size that they're at, and no one should feel bad about being at any size that they're at. But also, as health professionals, it's our job to let them know the risk factors. Being obese increases your risk factors for many different diseases, and we shouldn't sugarcoat that or water it down, as you say. That people need to be aware. This is what the science says. This is these are what the facts are, and then you make your own decisions. And no one should judge anyone for their decisions that they make. But they shouldn't not give them the information because it might hurt someone's feelings, or they might not be comfortable with talking about that kind of stuff. I think it's our job not necessarily to tell everyone what they want to hear, but what they need to hear, right? That's a really interesting way of looking at it, Dahlia.
It's interesting too, because some might even say the way that we eat is orthorexia, or it's obsessive or disordered eating. But again, it's that intention that you have behind your quality of life. Right.
And just to comment on all of this, because I think us having integrative practice, we really are just integrative mindsets, right? Meaning we just try to dive deep, and instead of we can all bicker on the surface, right, of like all those symptoms, but like what's below that? Like, what can we all agree on that is causing all this turmoil, or causing the water to be murky when it should be nice and clear? And really, when you dive deep down to it, it goes back to money. Like, a lot of times the root is money, and you look at money and how it influences, but it goes back to this paradigm we're in, where those who have the power and those who have the money kind of are the top dogs, and then will make the water as murky or as clear as they want it when they want it, and are in kind of control of this narrative. And something interesting Dahlia said was kind of, the healthy at every size. So let's say there was an organization where healthy at every size was their main goal, and this organization was very powerful and super wealthy. Then would that influence our textbooks for healthy at every size? Would we see more maybe medications geared toward healthy at every size? Would that be? And now we're kind of, then those going maybe not with the healthy at every size narrative are then going, oh my gosh, you guys are fringe, you're not following the research. And so and you can insert anything into that, right? What if what if we go into what if plant-based was the mainstream, and the big plant-based organizations were rich and powerful, and still either way, no matter, insert any organization, we don't want that kind of paradigm, right? Absolutely. We want, especially in research, and I'm going kind of into politics a little bit, but like within that, we don't want that paradigm of it's the most powerful. It should be a true democracy, right? And Absolutely. It's a democracy of information. So
and it does happen on the plant-based, and it does actually happen with plant-based organizations that are, like there are certain industries, like the nuts industry has quite a bit of funding to do research. The oil industry has a lot of funding to do research, and they do publish research that is more beneficial to their product. In some cases it's, I see a lot of oil studies that are comparing oil to like butters or other saturated fats, and of course monounsaturated fat's going to be better than a highly saturated fat, and then you can make a claim that this is healthier for you and things like that. So it does happen. And even, I'm not going to be biased towards plant-based studies that are also kind of not showing the full picture either. Totally. So we need to be careful about that as well. Just because we advocate for a plant-based diet, if a study comes out and it's not showing the full picture, we should criticize that study too. you know?
Yeah,
Exactly.
but I think, in it, if we're really taking a step back and looking at it in its totality, whether it is 100% plant-based vegan, whether it is, plant forward and predominantly plant-based, you can't argue with the research, right? Whether it's a Mediterranean style of eating, whether it is a 100% whole food plant-based way of eating, like you mentioned, there is robust data to show that it is one of the most beneficial diets for maintaining a healthy weight, for supporting the gut microbiota, for supporting cardiovascular health, for supporting, when properly planned, proper growth at any age, any stage in life, and so many other conditions. So you can't argue with that. And there are a lot of these fringe diets that kind of come and go, that become popular and seem attractive in the short term for a quick gimmick of what they can do. And a lot of the times it is just quick temporary symptom alleviation. Like right now in the gut health space, going carnivore is really big, and people are saying fiber's toxic, and when I stopped eating all that toxic fiber, my gut healed itself. Did it though? Or are you just not having symptoms because your body wasn't properly tolerating the fiber because there's something else going on? So
guys, what are you talking about? The guy who said that has a 6-pack. Of course he's healthy. We know everyone who has a 6-pack is automatically healthy, right? That's the rule of thumb here. So, if you're on TikTok and a dude that's jacked out of control and has a 6-pack is chomping on raw liver, you should definitely do that, right? That's science. So
I've got a really interesting view of looking at that, because there are things out there that can reduce symptoms, right? And things that reduce symptoms have some side effects or toxicity profiles, like medications, for example. Like if you're having, like, say you got IBD and you're going through a really big flare-up or healing crisis, and there's a lot of symptoms there, a lot of inflammation, and it might be worthwhile to take some medication, because the benefit of taking that medication outweighs the risk of the symptoms that you've got, right? And you control your symptoms that way. You're not going to heal necessarily, but you're going to get symptom relief, and you're going to get some kind of stability in your life. And I feel like some of these diets, they're really toxic too, and they can actually have a similar impact, right? And the body actually has to deal with it now, and then reduces the temporary relief of symptoms, and you feel better for a period of time until, again, something worse is going to happen later on. Hopefully for everyone who's following these diets, it doesn't happen in that way, but that's the way I look at it. But there's also something very interesting you said there, Dahlia, is that a plant-based diet, if appropriately planned. I'd like to preface that by saying that every diet needs to be appropriately planned. I think people actually will say, oh, but if you're following a plant-based diet, that needs to be planned properly. Well, so does any other diet that you follow. And if you're not planning your diet properly, then I don't think you're actually, looking closely at what you're eating well enough.
Yeah. Great point.
100%. And every diet needs to be properly planned, and really, and when you are properly planning it, it's a lifestyle, right? It's part of like a healthy routine, and then it doesn't it's sustainable. So it doesn't really fit into then even that diet box, or what people think is a diet of like, and I was in this category of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna diet for 6 months and then I can go back to normal. But then like, what? How does that make any sense, right? And then I'm gonna go back to gaining all the weight back or whatever I was trying to do, and having symptoms again. Like, how does that make sense? So it's shifting that a little bit. And then going back to medications and symptoms, it's funny, we've gotten to this thing where people aren't differentiating that, and it takes a lot to be conscious of that. Are you hiding your symptoms? Are you trying to just sequester some of the symptoms? And then it's understanding. We try to really help our patients understand what symptoms are. Symptoms are your body's way of communicating to you. And whether it's through an elimination type diet, that's a way to reduce symptoms. So maybe you can accomplish a goal. I kind of see it as like low tide and high tide, right? It's like, you're not going to go maybe look at the seashore and go try to collect seashells in high tide. In low tide, when you've reduced some of the murkiness and you're able to kind of see clearly, that's your time to go do work, look for those seashells and look and discover, oh my gosh, this is what's going on. That's what's there. You're not going to stay there forever. Your symptoms will come back, but now you kind of know what's going on, and you can appropriately plan and take action now, knowing. And whether that's through an elimination diet or with medication or both, but you're seeing this is short term. I have a long-term action plan because now I know what's going on. It's the context. And lately, something we've been saying is it's not yes, no, it's not right, wrong. It's like, yes, like let's look at all these perspectives and design the right plan for you using all the resources we have. Like
Absolutely.
that is what we do moving forward.
Absolutely. I think that's really important, because exactly, symptoms are your body's way of telling you something's not right. And realizing that, and not just trying to, it's like, so when if you're trying to clean up a room or clean up something, you're just going to put all the rubbish in the closet and just like pretend it's not there, or you're actually going to, like try and figure out a way to make sure that long term you're going to keep that, keep that room tidy and clean in the long term, and you figure out a process in which you can sustainably maintain that space for a long period of time. Metaphorically speaking, your body's keeping that clean and healthy, and finding a way of doing that sustainably for a long period of time is what we try and teach as well. And I think that's really important. And whatever your goal might be, if you have a action plan and you've got a structure around what you're doing, you're going to have a much better chance of succeeding with that. That's probably a good segue into some of the work that we do. Like we both do a lot of work around gut health. So, let's talk about that and some of the learnings that you guys have come across. I know you wanted to talk about, the IBS IBD link and things like that. So how about we start off wherever you want to with gut health, and then we can take the conversation from there.
Yeah. I think that, like James said, gut health is really up and coming. For quite some time, we were really hyper focused on cardiovascular disease. But even in just the last 5 to 10 years, we produced over 50% of the research on the gut microbiota. And we're learning more about that beautiful balance between the two. And what we're seeing from a perspective of a registered dietitian is, I love that more of an emphasis has been put on the gut and on nutrition for the gut. Not everyone acknowledges it because, in a recent poll, they still acknowledge that about 40% of gastroenterologists will tell patients that diet has nothing to do with your GI symptoms. And we know that that's not true. It's literally...
Is that only 40%? Was that only 40%? I thought it would be higher than that.
That's nearly half.
It's changing though. It is changing. Yeah.
It's changing.
It's changing. I think we're becoming more and more conscious, which is wonderful. But it's not only diet. So while I'm so glad that more healthcare practitioners, more patients in general are becoming conscious to the fact that diet certainly impacts the gut. And we know diet over the span of a lifetime, right? I always ask my patients when we have an initial visit, tell me your health story. I want to hear how everything was throughout your life from day one. How was mom's gut health when she was pregnant from you? Were you vaginal delivery? Were you breastfed? What did diet look like as a young child? Did it change throughout your life? Were you a binge drinker in college? Like, we want to kind of see what that looked like throughout the span of their lives and help them understand how today's symptoms are not just a result of yesterday's meal or today's meals. And also want them to maintain a healthy relationship with food. I think we tend to attract people and patients who have gone through a lot. Oftentimes it's not their first rodeo. They're not coming to us because they're like, oh, I just started feeling bloated. Many of our patients have seen several other dietitians, gastroenterologists, specialists, and they're coming to us because maybe the standard of care hasn't worked for them. They're like, I've tried low FODMAP and that's really all they tell me to do, or I've tried elimination diets, I've tried certain medications, and it might help for a little while, but my symptoms just keep coming back. So I always want to educate patients on figuring out how to incorporate plant foods back into their life and maybe do a reverse elimination. Maybe they've eliminated a little bit too much, but we want to help them how to figure out how to heal with each meal and really help them understand it's not all nutrition. Because sometimes it's a hyper focus. So we know not focusing enough on nutrition can result in symptoms or disease or disorder, but hyper focus on nutrition can also damage that relationship with food, can cause additional stress. So sometimes I help my patients step back and realize, okay, let's put this into perspective. You've been extremely stressed. You have this, genetic slant toward this. Are you not sleeping? Are you not properly hydrated? Are you not getting in movement? Those things are also extremely important. We can't rely on nutrition or expect nutrition to solve all of these issues and just mask the fact that your lifestyle is not in line and you're not taking care of some of those things. So sometimes with nutrition, we're like, let's kind of de-emphasize nutrition for you because you're putting so many eggs in this basket that you're neglecting some of these other areas. So for me with gut health, sometimes that's what I'm talking through with my patients. I'm understanding, how did your past traumas play into the way that your gut health is playing out today? We know that, those who experienced adverse life events before the age of 6 years old have about a 45 to 65 increased risk of having IBS. And we know with IBD as well, stress plays a factor in that. So I always like to help patients realize that.
Absolutely. I'm going to pause you there because what you've just talked about is one of the most critical aspects that people need to understand when they're trying to heal their bodies, because so much of the time we put, as you said, that you got a gut issue, I'm only going to think about what I eat, and we also, it's just like unreal that, because we haven't talked for a couple of years properly about these issues, and in the last couple of years we have come to these same realizations. Like we focus on the 5 pillars of health, so your diet, your hydration, your sleep, your exercise, and your mental health. And these 5 things need to be heading in the right direction for you. It's just, I'm just blown away that you guys are like seeing the same stuff. It's so interesting. This is so interesting.
And there's so many parallels with, I know we focus more IBS, SIBO, and things like that, and you guys are more focused IBD, but there's so many parallels to it as well. And I think when you're looking at the research and doing your best to keep the pulse on the research and what's going on, and really it's keeping a pulse on multiple things, right? Like what's going on in society, community, as well as your patient population and the research, because a lot of the times the research translates, sometimes it doesn't. We're always trying to take the good of Western medicine and the good of Eastern medicine, and the good of the research and all of it, and apply it. But then a patient might go, that didn't work. So it's like, oh, that on paper it said it should work, but you're saying it doesn't work. Interesting. So we're taking all that as well. And we've come to these conclusions of, like you said, the 5 pillars, and really just, taking that well-rounded integrative approach.
And there may even be a 6th pillar now. There might be a 6th pillar, which is community. Social community and interaction, which I think has really been neglected in the last couple of years, so that people haven't been able to.
I was going to add, I don't know, we gotta rethink our pillars, or like make it more clear, but overall, like spiritual health too. Like we're big on that, because there's something about talking to someone, having a deep conversation, whether you can call it community, but it is. And spiritual, I mean, look, if you're not religious or if you're not spiritual or anything, that's fine. You call it energy, like whatever you want to call it. There's something, whether you call it a soul, spirit, energy, there's something you exchange when you handshake somebody, when you hug somebody, when you share a kiss with a loved one. I mean, hugging your child is like a feeling. I mean, you can't bottle that and put it into a pill, right? I mean, people try, I think, with drug use, but you can't. So very interesting. Whatever that is, we call it spirituality. You can call it something different, but there is that too. If that's lacking, that is massive.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle, a big piece of the puzzle. So coming into some of your specialities, what I want to talk about now with you guys is your whole work, big body work from you guys on SIBO and IBS. And I also want to talk about one thing you touched on, Dahlia, was low FODMAP. So let's put that towards the end of the session, because it's I've got my own views on it. Like, Monash University that created low FODMAP is literally 15 minutes down the road from my house. Okay. And on their, we'll talk about it later, but on their kind of guidelines, they say that it shouldn't be used for more than 2 weeks, just to kind of find out where you are and try and resolve a few issues, and then you need to start incorporating food back. But it's kind of become this community of people that want to, this whole line of food products and this whole industry that's built around low FODMAP, when it's not a very healthy way of eating long term. But let's focus in on like IBS and SIBO first, and then we can maybe touch on low FODMAP as a way to finish off the session.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of give a recap, and then Dahlia can jump in. But yeah, so what we did was a while back. Was it 2 years ago now? We really fell in love. I know it's weird to say, but with like SIBO and IBS, because it was like, whoa, it's so interesting.
It is.
We're seeing so many patients with it, and it became, at least in our little bubble, it's probably not to everybody, but I think it's slowly getting there, kind of like gut health. But like in our bubble, SIBO is like everywhere. Like, whoa, SIBO, and we are diligent to kind of step back and go, not everyone has SIBO, we get that, but there's so many gut issues arising. And so in our bubble, we're just seeing it quite often. People seek us out for that. So we are aware of that. But, you know, we did about 2 years ago, develop a 7-phase, 100% plant-based, the first 100% plant-based SIBO IBS protocol. We beta tested it and went extremely well. Since then, since about a year ago, we've been just revamping it, updating it. We're still working on it, which we hope to have a cool announcement. So on that in the near future. So yes. Yeah. And so, but since then, we've really just been building our private practice, continuing to go there, and really helping patients one-on-one with that. Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know why I have this affinity for helping those who have tried some of these things. Don't get me wrong. I mean, a low FODMAP way of eating, which we'll get into, that can help some people solve some symptoms and put some symptoms into remission temporarily. But then what? What is the plan after that? Absolutely. So it's always saying, okay, what is the why behind your feeling, your symptoms, and the way that you are currently feeling? And again, I tend to really put that out there of, if you haven't found that relief, let's figure out why. We know that 10 to 15% of the population, at least here in the United States, suffers from IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And that's characterized by a change in the symptoms in the gut. So pain, change in bowel habits. It can be a change in overall feeling of the GI tract. And there's criteria for diagnosing this IBS. But basically, if you're having more than 3 instances over the span of 1 to 3 months, you qualify for that IBS diagnosis. But why? Why did you get diagnosed with IBS? What type of IBS might it be? And what could have been the trigger for that? Could be acute, where in the short term, maybe it was induced by food poisoning or gastroenteritis, right? Viral gastroenteritis. It could have been a virus that you had picked up. Short term, it could have been, acute stress that had induced some of these symptoms. But we know a large portion of those suffering with IBS and living with IBS, they have had these symptoms for several months, weeks, years, decades, in the case of some of my patients. So we want to help figure out why, right? What might be going on? Is there dysbiosis? Might that be causing some of the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or intestinal methanogenic overgrowth? Is it IMO? Is it SIBO? Is it SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, because of dysbiosis? If the answer is yes, just because you might have been diagnosed with SIBO, IMO, SIFO, that's not a root cause. What caused that dysbiosis? We want to try to figure out why. Is it motility? Is there something in, again, lifestyle that is offsetting that beautiful balance that we should all have in our gut, that's offsetting that eubiosis, causing that dysbiosis? So we want to help figure out why that might be. Is it gut barrier integrity, right? We've been hearing for the last several years about leaky gut, as it's kind of been phrased, but it's intestinal hyperpermeability. Our intestines, the lining of our intestines, are all permeable. All of us have leaky gut to a certain degree, right? But when it becomes hyperpermeable, then you're having an exchange. You're having a larger interaction between your gut microbes and your immune system. And not only that, you are having a larger exchange between your mast cells and your gut microbes. Maybe histamine intolerance is playing a part. Maybe there are other factors that are playing a part into that. Maybe your dysbiosis is causing oxalate intolerance, or, it could be so many things. So you want to figure out, okay, I've been given this diagnosis. what is it and what might be exacerbating my symptoms again. And that goes back to those pillars that we were talking about.
And so if I could just say really quickly, because that could be overwhelming. And for anyone listening, you're like, what did she just say? And, oh my gosh. So a quick analogy for that is I give a river analogy, but right now it feels good to maybe do like an ecosystem analogy where you can, if maybe you haven't seen this, but if you Google this or just do a little research, what happens when humans remove a species from an ecosystem? It's as simple as that. Or what happens when we really change an ecosystem landscape? We have this like cascade effect that we can't even fathom, right? We start to go, whoa, why is the river changing? Why do we have so many rats here now? Now we need more rat traps and rodenticides and all. And we start to go, oh my gosh, all we did was take away all the wolves, and now all this is. So it's like, however crazy you would think and however many factors you would think, if we took away, I don't know, I'm just using an arbitrary example, if we took away all the wolves from one area, and then all of a sudden you have this, which we've seen in history, we have these that's been documented in ecological areas of when we do this, just all these different things start to happen. We go, oh my gosh, the same thing is happening inside of our bodies, right? When we do that to ourselves, we're having a cascade of reactions where now we're understanding the estrobolome, right? Where we know, oh my gosh, our microbes help us control our estrogen and our testosterone and everything, and our neurotransmitters. Now my thyroid, wait, what's wrong with my thyroid? And it has this cascade effect, and you're going like, I'm just bloated. Like, what do you mean? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And you're like, oh, but yeah, it would be easy to go, you know what? You're bloated. Here's this, whether you're the Eastern modality and you're going, here's all these tinctures and teas, I'm bloated, and you're the Western modality that's going, here's all these medications and bloating medication. It's like, well, no, wait, let's dive deeper, right? Let's look at your ecology, your inner ecology. And go into that deeper.
You know, in a previous life, I was studying for a master's in business. And one of the courses I did was causal loop modeling. Okay. And what that means is you look at a problem and then you think about a solution. And one of the areas we did was, okay, let's research quick fixes, right? And so here's a problem, here's a quick fix. Okay. And you think short term that maybe you have solved some of the issues that were there with the problem. But what are the flow-on effects? So you start to model out the different flow-on effects. And it's exactly what you've talked about. Okay. So basically in this area, people are thinking, oh, wolves are a problem. So let's take all the wolves out of this ecosystem. And that was the quick fix. And that solved their initial issue. Right. And then they start to see all these flow-on problems that occur because of that decision. You know, and that's, I think, very intrinsic in our society, where we're looking for that quick fix very often, all too often, and not looking at the bigger picture of, okay, if I make this decision here, yes, for the next X amount of time, it's going to really solve my problem in the short term. Okay. But what is this going to mean for me a year down the track? What's this going to mean for me 5 years down the track? What is this going to mean for me 10 years down the track? And I think too much of the time we're not taking this kind of like, let's just zoom out from the what's going on right now in our lives and actually think, okay, how are we going to solve these bigger issues that we've got going on? I think the way you explained that was really nice.
Thank you. Yeah. And what you're explaining, another word for is this reductionism, right? We're just we're so in it. We're so close to it. We can't see anything else. And I think, you know, if I could, I know we're talking about a lot of things, but I like to believe, and this is part of my spirituality, is like, and I'm learning this even more so as the years go by, is like, I think, like they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? I think so many people have good intentions, right? Absolutely. The researchers, the politicians, the scientists, a lot of people do have good intentions. They're just so like this that they can't like, or they're just not, or I don't know, they haven't practiced taking a step back and going like, oh, wow, I thought I was doing good, but I see all the different problems. And so many of us are doing that. And we just kind of need to take a step back, right? We just kind of get away from that reductionism and that reductionist mindset.
And it has its time and place. So you know how the individual parts function. But then again, you want to see what's the role when you put them all together. And what does that look like? And so I think that's a big part of what's missing for those living with gut issues, whether it is IBS or IBD. And so it's nice to be able to kind of come into this space where now lifestyle medicine is more heavily emphasized. Now we're talking about and destigmatizing, talking about mental health and trauma, and really understanding that, yeah, these things do really play a role. And you might get temporary symptom alleviation from some of these things that you're trying, but you know, those symptoms are going to keep reminding you can't just keep going on the same path that you were on, and you know, again, not create any sustainable habits.
And one more thing, if I have to say on this topic, where what's really cool and where research is really, I think, especially in the gut health sphere of things, is the exposome. I think that what should I say, like category of research is really kind of hitting the nail on the head there, because the exposome is saying what is happening with your local environment, what is happening with the chemical environment, how is environment in general, right? It could be your food, your drink, the perfume you smelled, the car exhaust you smelled. How is that then interacting with your inner ecosystem, with your inner environment? We are calling that the exposome in the research. So I love looking at exposome research. There was a great Journal of Nutrients just put out a great one, a great research article on it, and it's looking into everything, and it's a great way to, I don't want to say generalize, but it gives that big picture look of like, oh, and it puts it in a nice category for those who are maybe in that reductionist mindset to go, oh, now we have a word to it. It's called the exposome, and there's exposome research, and oh, maybe environment and lifestyle does play a role. And it's great, like Dahlia said, to look at it very specifically, but also it's great to look at it broadly as the exposome and realize, oh, wow, there's a lot going on here. And each individual will be unique and different how we tackle what exactly is going on. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's give some practical advice to people, because we've talked about IBS and IBD, we talked a lot about theories. So if someone does think they've got SIBO or they've got IBS, maybe just talk about, you know, 1 to 3 things. Like, what are the first kind of couple of steps people should maybe make to try and improve their situation? Obviously, you know, I would always recommend getting guidance if you don't know what you're doing. But maybe, you know, even starting off in a particular direction until you're ready for some guidance, you know, there can be some things that people can do. So what would you say are some things people can do?
I think that's a great question. I would say if you're really starting off at square one, trying to really pare down on some of those low-hanging fruits, like reduce refined carbohydrates in your diet, which is refined and added sugar, reducing refined grains in the diet, eliminating dairy and trialing that type of elimination, reducing overt fats and high fat in the diet, which can slow down digestion and cause a lot of that heaviness. Those things in and of themselves can be really, really beneficial for somebody just basically starting off before they dive into a full-on, you know, full elimination diet. Kind of just address those simple things.
Because it's good, you know, because if you're not sure what you need to do, or you're not sure whether you think you can do it, just making those simple changes, dipping your toe in the water and seeing how you feel, more than likely you're going to feel better. And that can start to kind of springboard you onto thinking, oh, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I need to look into this more. And then you can start to delve into the more of the changes you want to make, and then, you know, get some guidance and actually drill down into exactly what needs to be done to solve your problems. I think, perfect. Yeah, exactly what people need to think about.
Definitely. And I think we've really gotten good at having a elimination mindset, but I think it's not replacement mindset, and saying start adding more plants.
Absolutely.
We love the addition mindset as well. Like elimination mindset is out there, but also addition, whether that's addition of sleep, addition of hydration, addition of course, even plant foods, right? In the right way. When we're talking about SIBO IBS, there's a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it.
Movement, body movements.
The addition of movement, the addition of sunlight, like there's so many additions you can make, as well as eliminations. Whatever speaks to you, start there before you go on this, like, before you go on 10-day detox, or you go on like a water fast, or you go on, like, people are so, it's so interesting. People are willing to go to like these extremes when Now, a lot of times you don't need to,
Don't need
at least just starting out. Yeah.
You don't need to. No, yeah, absolutely. Okay, and let's finish off the session with talking about low FODMAP, because that's quite an interesting topic for me, and as a dietitian, you've probably looked at it in much more detail than I have. So let's talk about first of all, what is it, and then what does it help with, and as you said, it should be used for a specific period of time if you have certain situations, but then what do you do next?
Yes, that's a really good question.
Hold on, but fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So it's an acronym, right? So FODMAP isn't like a secret map that leads you to health, right?
Throwing those dad jokes.
I got to throw in the joke. So yeah, so
I'm a dad too. I love it. Yep.
Yeah, see, that's why he's laughing so hard. See, I love the dad jokes. Like automatically happens when you become a dad. No, but yeah, so that's the acronym, and it's a low diet in those, right?
Yeah, so it's basically low in these fermentable carbohydrates, starches, sugars, different types of carbohydrates. So that's often kind of one of the guideline recommendations for those who have been diagnosed with IBS, or especially SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because it's saying, well, you're having some of these fermenters, whether they are healthy or commensal bacteria or archaea or yeast or fungus that have kind of migrated up into your small intestine, which is not where they belong. And they're just doing their right job in the wrong place. So it would almost seem like it makes sense to say, well, then stop giving them fuel and stop letting them ferment. So that is often when a low FODMAP diet is prescribed, whether that's by their doctor or their dietitian even. And don't get me wrong, I use it sometimes in practice, with the caveat and always giving that disclaimer of this is not meant to be used long term. I think you really hit that nail on the head when you said that. I have patients come to me saying, I went low FODMAP 4 years ago, and then I just continued to eliminate from there, and now I eat 5 different foods. I've had so many people say that. And again, it's that elimination mindset, and it's just simply taking away fuel for what's causing your symptoms. It's not necessarily a curative diet. It's not a prescriptive diet. It's just saying, hey, let's give you some relief. At the same time, you should be figuring out what's causing the issue instead of just saying, I just want relief, but I don't actually want to do the work to figure out what's wrong. So use it if it works for you in the short term, with the intention of systematically introducing some different groups of these FODMAPs as you're figuring out what's causing this issue. I can't emphasize that enough, because so often people come to me and they say, I was diagnosed with IBS or SIBO, and I was given, the medication or antibiotics, or I saw somebody who gave me the herbs. Again, it's almost like greenwashed medicine, right? It's the same thing. You're using supplements as you would have used medication. And I went low FODMAP, but it didn't help, or it helped me for 2 weeks, and then my symptoms came right back. So if you're not really diving deep and trying to assess what's going on in your body at large, you're going to keep finding yourself in this cycle of, okay, it's like going back to an unhealthy relationship. Like, oh, well, I felt a little better, not great in that relationship, but at least I didn't feel as awful as I do now. So I'll just keep going back, even though it's not working for me and it's not serving my needs. So whether it is somebody with IBS, or, we know that there's that intersection with IBS and IBD, 25 to 35% of those diagnosed with IBD also have symptoms of IBS. Even with 25% of IBD patients who have gone into remission might report that they have symptoms of IBS. So again, you want to really understand a time and a place to use an elimination program like the low FODMAP diet. Understand that it's not meant to be utilized long-term, and that you really, really need to be investigating with your team why it is that you were diagnosed with that in the first place.
If I can add to, with a low FODMAP diet, which is something that we are adding to and doing in our protocol, which is looking at, okay, we kind of have a sense of demonizing food a little bit, right? It's not the food that is the bad guy, right? But it can be. But you want to work with a knowledgeable care team who can understand how to properly prepare food, who can help you understand how to properly curate where to buy food and where to procure food, right? And what types of food could be really, really helpful, and maybe foods that you can eventually work up to. So there is that context. Another context, going to my favorite topic, the exposome. What's on your food? What have we added to your food? And I'm even talking about whole foods, right? When we're talking about pesticides and herbicides. So there is 100% pesticide residue. So pesticides are the umbrella term for fungicides, herbicides, rodenticides, that all the different sides fall under pesticides. So there are those residues on your food. Are you getting foods with less of those residues? Are you properly washing and, like I said, preparing those foods so it's less likely you are then bringing those chemicals into your body, into your microbiome, that's causing even more harm. And then you're kind of like scratching your head. I'm eating the right foods, but I'm still not feeling well. And so a lot of factors to think of, for sure.
Yeah, so it's a really good point as well. I mean, it's not always easy to get organic food that's accessible or affordable, but if people actually endeavor to do as much as they can, it's going to reduce that residue, as you said. You may not be able to do it 100% to start off with, or you may not even be able to find certain foods that are organic where you are, but whatever you can find, make that change, because that's going to help. Every little bit.
And life is about balance, right? And the gut is all about balance. So, you don't want to be someone who says, yes, I put all my eggs in that organic food basket, right? And that does happen. Sometimes people come to me and they're like, but I'm eating 100% organic and I'm eating low FODMAP, but I'm still having these symptoms.
Yeah, and just because something's organic doesn't mean it's healthy. Right? There's so many organic products out there that are not even close to being healthy, but just because it's got that label on it, suddenly, that should be okay. Same thing as vegan. Just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's healthy. There's so many of that. But it's vegan. That should be okay, right? You went to that vegan restaurant and had everything vegan, but it was, totally processed.
Might not help your IBS.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I think we've covered off a really wide range of topics there, guys. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I think everyone who's listening will really find some benefit there. And there's huge benefits to be found. I think as you said, we're going to be finding out more and more, and keeping that humble nature that we're always learning and we're always improving our knowledge base to help people is really important. But so once again, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to share the amazing knowledge that you have. Now, for everyone who's watching this or listening to this on the podcast, I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned something from this interaction. If you're following on the podcast, please subscribe and we'll get a new one every week. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and the little bell notification icon, and also give James and Dahlia a like, because they've done a great job and they've really helped us a lot with the information they've shared. And if you have any questions, there's a comment section down there. So ask questions and we'll do our best to reply to you. But apart from that, thank you guys again. And for everyone watching, make sure you eat plants and lots of them. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.